people who killed in self-defense. What's your story? Worked for an armed messenger service. Those guys that drop off cash and pick up deposits from banks/businesses in the armored trucks. Not even 10 AM, and as I was opening the door to the truck, I saw a huge guy, I'm not tiny, over 6 feet and well proportioned, in the mirror, meant just for this thing, get out of a car and run towards me. He put me in a choker hold and started grabbing for my gun. He manhandled me like I weighed nothing, would have easily gotten the gun if it wasn't a L3 holster. I managed to draw it, press it against him, and started pulling the trigger before I blacked out. I have no idea what he would have done if he got the gun, and I'm not used to just being tossed around like that. He turned out to be blind drunk and played for a college football team. I was with an abusive ex who would come home drunk every night. One night, we had a fight. I had my phone on vibrate, and that obviously meant I was sleeping with other PPL behind his back. He left for a while and came home drunker than I'd ever seen him. He wasn't making coherent sentences, but he lunged at me and wrapped his hands around my neck and sat on my chest. I thought I was going to die. I had done some BJJ when I was younger and managed to pull me legs up under his crotch, and then with everything I had, I pushed him off me. He hit his head on the sharp corner of a table we had in the living room and went still. I figured he had been knocked out, so I went outside and called the police. I was gonna put his ass in jail. I had the deepest purple bruises in perfect fingerprint form around my neck. He would have gone to jail. I smoked a cigarette outside, walked back in after I calmed my nerves, just to make sure he wasn't awake and coming for me. He had a huge pool of blood under him. It was almost black looking, so I stood there trying to figure out WTF I was looking at. Put 2 and 2 together, and the rest is history. Years of therapy. Self-defense plea. Open and shut. I was back at my home country during a civil war. Some people started going to random villages and draft males and use them as soldiers. They eventually came to our house and took me a 12-yo and my brother a 10-yo. It was a few hours drive until we eventually reached a checkpoint where we would be stationed. Them being animals, one of the commanders took me and my brother to an abandoned building close to that checkpoint and then took off his gear and was trying to rape my brother. I was scared and in a panic I grabbed a decent sized rock and hit him in the back of the head before he can do anything to my brother. He fell and I got on top of him and smashed his face over and over and over with the rock until it was caved in. Me and my brother then ran from that abandoned spot through some mountains and kept running until we reached a city nearby. We went to a nearby mosque, washed the blood off of us, and told the sheikh in that area to help us and that we were from said village. To our luck, he was a decent human being and returned us back to our village. A few years later we moved to the US. My brother killed himself 2 years ago and I'm still in school. Neither me or my brother told anyone about what happened in that spot. All they know is that we escaped. I want to comment on this to get it off my chest, since I don't have opportunities to talk about this with my friends, since I'm scared of what they will think. I was born in Honduras. I live in the US now, and from what I remember, it was a very deserted place. I spent most of my time with my walking to this girl's house who was around 16 years old. A couple other kids would come to her house, since education was hardly accessible. She would teach us our shapes, animals, colors etc. After class was over I went home, and I heard my aunt scream from the kitchen, "Ahuda Ahuda." And then I remember that my uncle kept a gun hidden covered in rocks beside our old bathtub outside. That's where we bathed. He knew how dangerous it could be in this area, so he prepared me for everything. Went around the back and grabbed it as fast as I could. I went in and there stood a man with a knife threatening my aunt. I didn't really grasp what was happening, but I shot him without any second guesses like I was taught by my uncle. I honestly still don't believe I did something like that to this day, and I don't know what would have happened to my aunt if I didn't get there sooner. I still don't feel comfortable talking about this to my friends, but I just want to get it off my chest. Shared this before, but I was staying with my grandfather while my parents were out of state, and I woke up to a noise coming from upstairs, main floor. I was in the basement and just knew it wasn't my grandfather. He has hearing damage from Vietnam and it didn't wake him up, but there was banging around and heavy footsteps. I was in the room with the gun cabinet, so I grabbed a shotgun and went to check it out. When I got to the top of the stairs I just saw a guy in the living room going through stuff, so I pressed the safety and said he needed to leave. He turned around and saw my unthreatening scared as shit 14-year-old self and told me to just go back downstairs and mind my business, so I repeated myself. He turned around and started walking towards me with something in his hand, so I fired. At this point my grandpa is very awake and comes out of his room and just tells me to look away and call the police. Thankfully, due to all the factors of him being a repeat offender, having a weapon, my age, and castle laws, it didn't go any further than the police coming and asking me questions. It messed me up for a while, and I still think about it often, but I got over it and realized that as unfortunate as it was, I didn't have a whole lot of options at that point. I've shared this before. Not sure if it was accidental, but while in college in my first apartment, I came home from work at 3 AM. Some dude was in the hallway outside my door, and I had a bad feeling about it. I paused and went to get the mail, hoping he would leave. Nope. I come back, and he is waiting at my door. I asked him what was up, and he said he was looking for John. My name is not John, and I lived alone. I asked him to move and let me in my door. He told me to fuck off and get John. I slid between him and the door, opened it, and he pushed his way in. I pushed him out. He took a swing at me. I swung back, hitting him in the eye, which caused him to fall back and hit his head. Out cold. Forever. Apparently John was the guy who lived in the apartment before me. The dead guy spent 5 years in jail because of John ratting him out for drugs. Dead guy came to get some revenge. Got dead instead. My dad is a security guard. He's very good at his job and has recently been asked to work in Japan for a music festival as a bodyguard of the artist organizing it. Back in 2016 he kicked a crackhead out of a concert for, you know, being jacked up on crack. The guy waited outside and followed my dad home after the concert. Being so damn high he obviously didn't think and just wanted revenge. When he got my address he left, but came back every so often waiting for a time that none of us were home. He snuck into the crawl space of my roof and lived there for what was apparently 2 weeks before my parents and brother were out at my brother's soccer game. So I'm home alone and bored, and I hear some banging in the roof. I didn't know there was a dude up there at the time, obviously, so I opened up the roof to find out what it was. The second I opened it, he pounced on me. I kicked him off as soon as possible and ran down the hallway. He was a hell of a lot faster than me, and as I realized this the adrenaline finally kicked in, and I decided to stay and fight. I turned around, just in time to see him pull out a knife and go for my back. I put out my hand and the knife went straight through, but I didn't feel it. The adrenaline was pumping. In a pure moment of fear, rage, and offense, I ripped my hand away, punched him with my left hand, and ripped out the knife with my right. He ran at me again, and I felt as if time slowed down. I held out the knife and happened to hit him in the throat. He suffocated about a minute later. I immediately called emergency services and 3 minutes later an ambulance and 2 cop cars showed up. The cops didn't arrest me as there was proof it was self-defense and that he was under the influence of cocaine, so I was free to go to the hospital. The knife had barely missed my bones, but it was too close for stitches. So I had to have my hand sort of glued together with a type of biodegradable, non-toxic super glue. I was 12, the oldest of 3 brothers. We were home alone, while my parents were out on date night. At maybe 10 PM we hear a loud banging at the front door before a man broke the lock with his sheer body weight and momentum. I told my brothers to hide in my room while I went to my parents' room for their shotgun. The whole time this guy's yelling about where are my keys, and he starts coming upstairs. When he heard me fumbling as I tried to load the shotgun, he flung the door to my parents' room open, and I fell back with the gun shaking in my hands. I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger twice. The first one caught him in the legs and the recoil made the second shot catch his entire torso. The poor man had been drunk and lived a few houses down the way, but I didn't learn that until after. All I could focus on was how he was begging his mother, she wasn't there, not to let him die, and that he was sorry he let her down as he slowly died on the floor just feet away from me. One night I was walking home, pretty late, like 2 AM in the morning. I was 16 at that time and I happened to pass a bar. One drunk old dude said, "Hey, come here and buy me a beer." I started to walk faster and pretend I didn't hear him. Right after that he jumps on my back, trying to choke me. Managed to fall hard on my back. He was still piggy riding me. Unfortunately when we fell he hit his head on the curb.